So it's been almost a week since I took delivery of the Model Y. And in that time, I've put over 500 miles on the car. On Monday, I had to make a 300-mile round trip, which ended up being about 5 hours in the car. So I feel like I've gotten to know this car pretty well in a short amount of time. Now, one of the most popular questions that's popped up in my comments is, how does the Model Y sound compared to the Model 3? And that's the question I want to answer today. So we're headed to pick up my mother's Model 3 and we're gonna do a sound test. I'm just about there, so I'm gonna set this camera up in her car and we're gonna get to the test and we're gonna answer the question of sound. Model Y versus Model 3. So we're currently in the Model 3. It's an all-wheel drive extended range model, if that makes a difference. And we're gonna do 3 different tests. The first is going to be using the dB meter to see what the car sounds like 0 to 70 on acceleration. Then we're gonna play a couple songs. Hopefully that comes through on the microphone to see how the sound system sounds in this car. And then the third is going to be another dB test to see what the car sounds like on highway traffic. So let's get going. All right, so first up, there's a stretch of road up here where I can do the 0 to 60 to test the acceleration. During this test, I'm not gonna do any talking. I'm just gonna hold the meter up and stay as quiet as possible. So here's the first stretch of road. No cars are behind me. We're gonna come to a complete stop, which we are. Get this going. There's 70. Go ahead and turn this off. Now I'm gonna play a couple songs while I'm trying to get to the highway, and we'll see how the sound system sounds in this car. Now, real quick, all these songs are copyright free. Obviously, I can't play standard music, otherwise I'd get copyright infringement. So we're doing all copyright free music that I use for vlogs. Trying to get some different types of songs, different sounds, different instruments, highs, lows, everything. All right, so there you have some different songs and some different music that is in the premium sound system of a Model 3. So I'm gonna go get to the highway and then we will do a dB test on the highway at highway speeds, which are about 75 to 80 on the highway we're headed to. So be right back. All right, so here we are on the highway. The speed limit here is 70. We are going to do 79 miles an hour. So we are set to 79 right now, and we're gonna run the dB test again. So there you have it. I'm taking this exit ramp. We're gonna go get the Model Y and we're gonna do the same test now in the Model Y. All right, so here we are back in the Model Y. We're gonna run the same 3 tests in the exact same spot. So first we're gonna do the acceleration 0 to 70 dB test. Then we're gonna test the premium sound, and then we're gonna jump on the highway and do the highway test. So let's get going. All right, here we go. We're stopped. There we go, 70 miles an hour. I will say, I don't know if it's because this is a performance and my mother's car is a all-wheel drive extended range. The hum on the acceleration, because it's so much faster, it like spools a little bit. It's a little bit louder, so I'm interested to see what effect that will have on the test. I'm not going to know these results. You already know them. I don't, so I won't know these till we get home and I can look at the video, but I'll be interested to see what test or what effect that has on the test. So this is where we did the sound test, so let's run those same songs and see how they sound in this. Now in the Model 3, I had the sound almost all the way up. I'm going to do the same thing here. So there you go. There's our sound test between the two cars. Again, I don't know how that's going to translate over my microphone, but those are the tests. I'll talk about more of that in a second. Let's get to the highway and do the highway speed noise test. So we're on the highway. We are doing 79 and we are going to run this test. So there you have it. That is the sound in the Model 3, the Model Y. Let me get turned around and we will talk all about my thoughts on this car over the past roughly week. So I wanted to interrupt the video because I am editing the footage and seeing the results of the dB meter test for the first time, and I'm actually really surprised with how this turned out. Now I know I could have done this a lot more scientifically. I could have put the meter in the same spot on each car. I could have run it a lot longer, but this is how I did it. This is the results. So before I tell you what the results were, you already have seen them, I'm breaking this down into 3 categories. The first is what the dB meter read when the car was stopped and silent. The second is the top reading from the acceleration test. And then for the highway test, I'm going to give what the lowest reading was and what the highest reading was. So on the Model 3, when the car was stopped, the meter read 60.1. On the Model Y, it read 59.5. And then for the acceleration test, the highest the meter got was 71.4 on the Model 3, and on the Model Y, it was 71.2. And then for the highway test, the Model 3 read 67.6 as the low, and 70.6 as the high. And on the Model Y, it was 67.7 as the low, and 69.5 is the high. This is really interesting because just from what I hear, I would have guessed it would have been totally different, but back to the video. So after having the Model 3 for 9 months, putting 30,000 miles on the car, what are my thoughts between that and the Model Y over the past week of owning this car? So the Model 3 definitely feels a little bit more glued to the road. It's just a lower sitting car. It handles perfectly through turns. I have no concern about speeding up through a turn or losing control of the car. Because it sits lower, there's little to no body roll in the car unless you're really going hard around a turn. And in the Model Y, that's not the case. The car sits much higher. It has much more body roll when you're going through a turn. I find I don't take turns as aggressively as I did in the Model 3 because one, I'm getting used to the car and what it can do and what it will hold on to, and two, you can feel that roll as you're really going through a sharp turn. So the one thing that I struggled with in the Model 3 was the wind noise. There was much more wind noise in the Model 3 than there seems to be in the Model Y. I don't know if they've done something differently to dampen that noise and reduce it, but I always felt like a window was cracked. You know when a window's cracked in the car, you kind of hear that hissing? I always felt like windows were cracked. I was always reaching over here to try to roll up the windows in the Model 3. In the Model Y, that's not an issue. It just sounds much more quiet. Now, this is totally subjective, but for me, I historically drove larger SUVs and I preferred sitting higher up. So for me, this feels more comfortable. It feels like a better ride than the Model 3 was. The Model 3 sat so low that if you drove over a quarter, you felt every single bump in that car. Lindsay and my son always complained about how much you felt in the Model 3. The Model Y is a smoother car. Now the tires between the two cars both had 19-inch wheels, so it's not that I went from a different type of wheel, but I think that's characteristic of a sports sedan. It sits lower to the ground, you want to feel more of the road, where in a car like the Model Y, they probably want this car to ride a little bit smoother and did things to make that a realistic thing. A downside for me with regards to the Model Y over the Model 3 is the rear view. I shot two quick videos, which I'll show you now, showing what it looks like when you look into the rear view mirror of a Model 3 and what it looks like when you look into the rear view mirror of a Model Y. So one thing I want to show is what it looks like out the rear view of a Model 3. You can see the back window is as big as the rear view mirror can be. There's really no obstruction in a Model 3 looking out the rear view mirror. So now I wanted to show the view of what the car looks like in the Model Y in the rear view mirror. You can see how much smaller the rear view is in the Model Y. I think because they moved that center pillar back and it's much wider, it's just much harder to see out of the rear view mirror of this car. I mean, it's not terrible, but it's by no means great. Now, clearly, that's a huge difference, and there's just less visibility out of the rear view mirror of the Model Y. From a sound system standpoint, the cars are both very good. The sound is very good on both cars, but I don't know what it is about the Model Y, and I don't want to find myself wanting to like this more, but I think it's because the car is more open and there's more space in the car that the acoustics in this car are better. The sound system just sounds more full. The bass is deeper, the highs are higher, the lows are lower. The sound system in this feels better. And maybe the car, being a newer car, it's got more recent speakers, the speakers are better, they've done something to change the sound. But doing this test, I kept the sound levels just even on both cars, so they were set the same. I just feel like it sounded much more different in this car. So to kind of put a bow on this project and thinking back to what the results were, I'm blown away with how close this was. I would have guessed going into this that the Model Y was just going to show to be a much quieter car, but it was a lot closer than I thought. Now, my personal perspective still is that the Model Y is quieter, and I think maybe that's because the car sits higher on the ground, so you're not getting as much road noise. The tires are the same, so there's nothing going on there. I do feel that I was always grabbing for the windows to make sure they were up because it sounded like they were cracked, and I don't have that going on in the Model Y. But regardless, the results are what the results are. I have my personal perspective on how I feel about it, so thanks for watching. Get better, be better. We'll see you in the next one. See ya!